It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day, listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's episode 125, recorded on this day, the 28th of August, 2025. Joining me, as usual, is Hong Kong Jack. G'day, mate. How are you?
I'm well.
How are things briefly in Hong Kong? Hot and sweaty still?
Yeah.
Hot and sweaty season?
Yep.
Excellent.
Hot and sweaty season. Yep.
You got the short sleever on today?
Yeah. It's aircon on weather. Yeah.
All right. No, good.
I mean, the aircon won't start coming off for another few weeks yet. You know.
Excellent work. All right. Now we've got much to get through today in politics and society, particularly in Australia. We have a manhunt going on in Victoria's High Country after 2 police were killed and 1 wounded at a property in Porpunka. Jack, beautiful country. Beautiful country around there. I know a lot of my mates used to go to Bright for their Christmas holidays.
And Porpunka is at the bottom end of the Buckland Valley, and the Buckland River is a great place to go trout fishing, I can tell you.
Trout fishing, water sports, all that sort of stuff. Lovely part of the world in Victoria's High Country, and
pretty rugged though.
Yes, well, the man Desi Bird Freeman is the suspect in this double homicide of police, and he is on the run, known to be a very in fact, the police commissioner, chief commissioner of police, has said he knows this terrain better than we do. And as of the 28th of the 8th, just after midday, he remains on the run. He is said to have, we'll be completely clear about this. He is a man who has carried sovereign citizen beliefs, Jack. He attempted to arrest a magistrate in Wangaratta. He was also involved in a very strange and quite amusing, in a sense. There was an attempt to privately prosecute Dan Andrews in 2022 at the Myrtleford courthouse, and it was the court audio system was basically just completely overwhelmed by caucus, and we were getting music and speeches from sort of the Cookaverse, while the magistrate was trying to hold a bit of order. And at that time, Desi Bird Freeman, his real name is Desmond Philby, with relatives in and around the Wangaratta area or Donga area, and he turned up at this show, and this attempt to privately prosecute Dan Andrews with outstanding warrants, and was arrested by police at that time. He's held a long adverse relationship with police and the courts, and the sovereign citizen stuff. Well, the similarities between this one and Wyambilla in Queensland are a little bit too difficult to avoid. What do you know about sovereign citizens, Jack?
Not a lot. I've got to say my initial reaction to this was, right from the beginning, it was known that this fellow was known to police to be a bit of a nutter, whatever kind of nutter he was, but a bit of a nutter. I think the Victorian police sometimes are a bit heavy-handed with their use of SWAT-type tactics. But when you're going to execute a warrant on a known nutter, I'm inclined to say, yes, please, we'll use them.
Tactical response. Yeah, but the difficulty with that is, Jack, that it's a finite resource. And across the state, in fact, across the country, on the basis of counter-terrorism analysis, a lot of people, whether they're sovereign citizens or whether they are just deemed to be of high risk, are having their firearms seized. And Now, we're told there've been some sort of messy reporting. The Australians said that it was a warrant to seize firearms, but other organisations are claiming that it is a warrant of historical child sex offences. Now, I don't know what the answer is.
I've read both, yes.
Clearly, there was a risk assessment taken by police. 10 police officers attended the property. One of the deceased officers is the leading detective, a 59-year-old, by the name of Neil Thompson, a 38-year veteran of the force, and a Belgian-born senior constable, Vadim Devort, who's 35, who joined the force in 2019. Those two other deceased police officers, extremely sad. I think there was a proper risk assessment made. My first view on this was a sickened feeling that, like the situation in Wyambilla, that the 4 police officers had gone there not expecting a violent response from the residents of the property, the trains, I should say. But this appears not to be the case for the Victorian one. The trouble is with the Special Operations Group, the Tactical Response unit of the Victoria Police Force, is that they're very finite resources. And it's, certainly in hindsight, you would say, yes, it had to happen. But having 10 police officers at a scene generally should keep you pretty safe.
Yes.
But not in this case. This guy is on the run, very, very dangerous. He's loaded up with firearms, rifles, shotguns, and, of course, it's been reported that he's in possession of at least one police service revolver, or it's not a revolver, it'd be an automatic Glock-type weapon. And the search for him will continue. I really hope they catch him alive, Jack.
I've had a look at where the property is. He didn't have to go. He's on the edge of the bush there, and there's on the edge of a lot of bush. It goes a long, long way up into the mountains.
A lot of caves, a lot of mine shafts, abandoned mine shafts, lots of places for him to hide. He's known well. He's known as a highly skilled sort of bushman, but police will wait him out. I really hope that he's captured alive and faces the full force of the law, and also I hope that some of his associates are made to feel mightily uncomfortable about this. On the Monday night, I checked the sort of Sovereign Citizen social media accounts, and there wasn't one expression of sympathy towards the police. In fact, the common view was, they shouldn't have been there in the first place. So there's this sort of disconnect between these sovereign citizen groups and the rest of us. My view is that it would be wonderful to deem them or make them a prescribed terrorist group, but because they're such an amorphous, disconnected group of people, I think that's very, very difficult, and you will struggle with definitions. It's not the same as let's say, an Islamic radicalised group where everyone is sort of a member by association, a member by what they do and who they're with. But this is a little bit harder.
I mean, you'd like to treat people like this like we treat the outlaw motorcycle gangs, right? To see them as always a potential threat. But they're much more organised, the motorcycle gang. So you're right. That's easier to do because you know who's a member, you know who's not.
Yeah, it's good.
And because you get informants within the group and all that kind of stuff. These more amorphous semi-political groups, they're much harder to keep an eye on,
They are political and geographic fringe dwellers more often than not. And, police now, you would have to say it must be one of the more terrifying elements to their job, having to execute warrants, regardless of what those warrants might be, whether they're seizure of firearms or related to some criminal event. this is becoming a very, very difficult thing. What we do need is police at command level to understand the nature of it. I can't believe by now that they wouldn't, and to make an assessment and err on the side of safety in terms of engaging a tactical response.
Yeah, I'm just presuming that they know a fair bit about this because I don't doubt their competence in that regard. And I would have thought they'd have learnt some lessons from the Queensland case.
Yes,
but there's kind of, and you're right. I mean, my initial reaction was, why no SWAT group there? But if someone has to exercise that judgment. It's not always easy, and you're not always going to get it right.
Well, we did have another incident in Tasmania. Not, I believe, certainly the man who's been arrested and charged with the murder of a police officer in sort of northern Tasmania. There's no indication that he had any engagement with sovereign citizen groups, but 2 general duties police officers walked down a long driveway on his property, on his farm property, to execute a warrant of seizure of the property. And Tasmania Special Operations Group waited at the end of the driveway, some 300 or 400 metres long, and one of the police officers was shot dead. One of the general duties police officers was shot dead. Now, the obvious question is, why was that tactical response not used? Always easy in hindsight, but when you're going to execute a warrant of that nature, I think you've got to be bearing in the side of safety when calling in tactical response.
I mean, the risk is that, like the outlaw motorcycle gangs, these people have zero respect for the law, for the rule of law, and for the police. They think they see themselves, just like the outlaw motorcycle gangs, as existing in some kind of world where that doesn't apply to them, which makes them very dangerous when you are exercising the law by executing a warrant or arresting someone.
The sovereign citizen framework creates this sort of pseudo-law framework which says that the state is illegitimate.
Yes.
And therefore law enforcement is not just illegitimate, but it is their enemy. It is the enemy of their freedom, etc. Yeah. So that's where the dangers come. In some ways,
some of the Islamist groups have a similar problem because they too see that the state they're living in as illegitimate, and they belong to something that is at a level higher than that. And that makes some of these people very difficult to deal with, very dangerous.
Yes, as I say, I expect the Victoria Police Force to react and not see this guy as a sort of lone actor, but they need to see him as part of a wider group. Groups that sit around in social media discussions, basically normalising violent rhetoric towards police. These people need to have their collars felt as well, and we hope that will happen. As I say, having a look at some of the social media stuff, there is a lot of sympathy expressed towards the alleged offender, none to police. And this problem is not going to go away while we sort of deal with it as a sort of lone gunman type theory. This is part of an amorphous but organised group all the same.
Well, the Crime Commission and the various police services around the country have immeasurably improved the way they've dealt with the outlaw motorcycle gangs over the last 20 years. Right? It was always fairly hopeless, but they have gotten better and better at it. They monitor well, they monitor closely, and the same sort of effort is required with this.
Well, I can tell you that happy to tell this to our listeners. I became very concerned about the group that was hanging out the front of the old Parliament House in late 2021. Now that ultimately led to an arson attack where the doors were burnt down, and the arsonist was ultimately given a brief jail term, and the person who was an accessory was given a slap on the wrist. But it was a lot more dangerous than just playing with fire. We looked at some of the lives from this group, and they were saying they were going to storm the building and basically create an alternate government within the walls of the old Parliament House. Now, I rang the National Security Hotline and said, look, I've got this bit of evidence and this bit of evidence and that sort of thing. And at that time, December 2021, I think they thought I was an idiot. They were just going, oh, mate, yeah, we'll get that now. Yeah. There was almost, there's no sense of it. After Wyambilla...
That's how we used to treat information about the outlaw motorcycle gangs 25 years ago, and they've gotten better at understanding it. I do hope these people are going to open the non-members bar in Old Parliament House, because that's been a loss to the community, I've got to tell you.
Well, we did have the case earlier this year where a group of sovereign citizens deceived the management of the Old Parliament House into renting out part of the building, where they conducted a mock trial and sentenced God only knows who to long periods of jail that they don't own. And that was acutely embarrassing. I remember having chats with the board members of the Old Parliament House. But my point was that, talking to the National Security Hotline, after Wyambilla, there was another occasion that involved a sovereign citizen, or a person with sovereign citizen links, who was sort of behaving in a very odd way on social media. And when I rang the National Security Hotline some weeks after the Wyambilla attacks that led to 2 police officers and a neighbour being shot dead, I was in touch with a counter-terrorism analyst within 2 hours that time. Yeah. So there is a sense now that we got to get better at this. We got to get better at monitoring them. We got to get better at charging them before they become really dangerous.
And it's not going to be a perfect system. Is the answer?
I think part of the problem too, Jack, and we need to move on. But part of the problem is that the media find it very, very difficult to define it. They often say, sovereign citizenry, that is, and they often say, well, it's people who don't agree with our laws or don't feel that that our laws have any jurisdiction over them. And I think, well, that's only part of the problem. And
that sort of describes the League of Rights from the late 60s and early 70s.
It can describe anybody who has any sort of disagreement, with their laws. Where it becomes dangerous is that these people are constantly ideating violent attacks, and they are always against frontline police. They're the ones who suffer these. We can talk about it in an esoteric way, but it is frontline police who face the highest risks. Moving on, Jack, the Linda Reynolds has won her defamation case over Brittany Higgins. She has won $340,000 in damages with interest and I guess legal fees, or the costs have not been yet determined.
Some of the legal fees, yes.
Justice Toddle found mostly in Ms. Reynolds' favour, but some of the tweets made by Brittany Higgins were deemed to be okay, were deemed to be in the public interest, I think, or that she'd established a public interest defence by
qualified privilege.
You tell me.
Interest. Yeah, qualified privilege and public interest. The 340 odd sounds like a lot of money, but I think Linda Reynolds gave evidence for 5 days. This was an extensive case. And I've got to tell you, this sort of litigation, the meter ticks really quickly.
I shouldn't laugh, but yeah. So what are we looking at in costs? You want to give me a ballpark?
7 figures each, I would have thought.
But not. I wouldn't say we'd be looking at 7 figures with a 1 in front.
Perhaps not. Yeah. Certainly at least $1 million, I would have thought. And the judge, at the beginning of the trial or before the trial commenced, had a serious and stern word to the parties, suggesting that this ought to be resolved.
Yes, indeed. So there was a concerted effort from the judge to put the two parties around the table, and I think that was pretty much rejected by both, wasn't it?
I wasn't in court, couldn't tell you who rejected it. I presume that someone as well advised as Linda Reynolds would have made either issued a Calderbank letter or a formal offer of compromise. This is a thing where you offer to settle the matter for an amount of money, and if the final judgment is better than the amount of money that you offer to settle it for,
yes,
you get every bit of your costs, right? That would be very damaging for Brittany Higgins. I've got to say, this is one of those cases where, if you were advising Brittany Higgins, you would think, look, you got a lot of money out of the Commonwealth. If you want to give it back to Linda,
$2.4 million.
If you want to give it to Linda Reynolds, that's okay. But what you could do is just withdraw the imputations that were in the choice, make an apology, and settle for a modest amount of money and some costs. That's not going to be easy to do or cheap. But if you go on from today, you're taking huge risks with little hope with little reward. Right?
Yeah, so I did note, so certainly we must just, Justice Tottle found Ms. Higgins made objectively untrue and misleading statements around the time of her 2021 interview on Network 10's The Project. But I do note also that Ms. Higgins said after the judgment was handed down that she wished Linda Reynolds well. I believe Brittany Higgins is now working for a public relations company with her partner.
And that's good public relations advice for her to come out and say that. So.
Yeah, probably it is, yes. I dare say that's right. And that $2.4 million compensation payment that she made, we might remember that she purchased a property in France with that's now been sold, I believe. And so that $2.4 million that she's received, she won't have much of that left once costs are determined. If they come against her, cost orders are made against her, and I suspect they will.
Yes, and Linda Reynolds has had to put up her house as collateral to do this. This is increasingly looking like one of those wonderful situations where all the lawyers get paid and nobody else does.
I looked at a probate case, and it's separate from a defamation. A probate case where you had two family members brawling about their share of an estate. And the judge said to them, the proceedings have gone on for years, and the judge said to them, he goes, there's nothing left. It's all gone to the lawyers. And
well, this famously happened here in Hong Kong, a very, very large estate involving buildings in Repulse Bay, et cetera, and it seemed like nearly every law firm or accounting firm in town had a seat at the table somewhere. Until all the money ran out.
No more money. And you're looking at, from what you're telling me, that's we must be getting into 8 figures there,
yes.
in property assets.
Yes.
So it's just nuts, isn't it? I mean, it's just, people don't have that. So many people do not have that ability to step back and be objective.
Yeah. Linda Reynolds came out and said, well, look, this is about vindication, right? And I've had clients sit across the desk for me and from me and tell me, it's about vindication, it's about proving that I was right and all that kind of stuff. And you try and explain to them carefully that really, in the end, a court case like this is about money, which is, of course, why I used to like acting for the Wharfies, because they knew it was about money. They knew what they were doing there,
and they knew when to stop, and they knew when to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
All right, essential poll out. I really, there are some political things that are worth sort of quickly touching on. Approval for Anthony Albanese is net positive by about 3 points. Then we've got the approval of Susan Leahy. It would seem that there's more known about her. The poll in July had 33%. Where are we? 33% didn't know who she was. Now that's 28%. And of that 5% that do know now who she is, it's been spread pretty evenly across the approve and disapprove. She's got a 35% approval rating and a 37% disapproval rating. Not too bad for a person.
That's respectable for a new. Yeah.
And the approval of Jacinta Allen is also in the essential poll. 36% approve of her. 10 of those strongly approve. 33% strongly disapprove. So you've got a 51% disapproval rating. She's got a negative 15 on that. And then we get to Brad Batten, recently installed as the opposition leader. His numbers aren't too bad. Overall approved 40%, 26% don't know, and 35% disapprove. So he's in positive territory there.
If you were Jacinta Allen, you'd be moderately pleased with that result. Only 15% in the red.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. In fact,
the other thing Essential did was they polled on the government plans to recognise Palestinian statehood, and they got 37% don't know, 34% yes, it's a good idea, and 29% against. So
yeah, I was going to mention that. That was interesting to me, and I think that's what it's saying is, listen, external or international conflicts are not driving our own politics.
No, people. More of them don't know than anything else. So
yeah, that's right. The other theme that I was quite convinced of, maybe a no-brainer in a poll, but there was 50% support for a 4-day week, Jack. And we talked about that last week and how it can be beneficial in some cases and perhaps not if it was mandated across the board.
It's just the bus drivers who are saying no.
But 50% support for a 4-day week. And the other one, not much of a no-brainer, but it was views on AI copyright, with the question being, the proposals being, copyright law should be changed to give tech companies free access to creative content to improve the quality of their AI models. 18% support that. 82% say copyright law should not be changed. And I think that shows that people are a bit switched on to that, to what's going on in the AI space and copyright space.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Interesting stuff from the essential poll. We had. Well, this is the first time it's happened in Australian history, isn't it, Jack?
First time since the war. Since World War II. Since World War II.
Yes, I presume we punted the Germans and the Japanese.
Yeah.
So the Iranian ambassador has been expelled after security agencies, ASIO, etc., believed that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard were engaged in soliciting criminals to commit crimes, including the arson on the synagogue, the Adus synagogue, Jack.
Yes, as you said, this is the first time since World War II, which, when you think about it, that means that in all those years of the Cold War, we never sent home the Soviet ambassador. They never got a red card. Got a few yellows, which means you get called in for an uncomfortable conversation with the foreign minister.
And maybe some lesser diplomats sent home.
Yep. We did plenty of that, sending lesser diplomats home. But not through all those years of the Cold War.
And, of course, Australia's embassy in Tehran has been closed.
Yes.
and that was done deftly. I suspect that was all done in advance of this notification that the Iranian embassy, I believe he's got about 3 days left to leave the country, maybe 5 days left.
Saw a photo of him in the car going to the airport yesterday.
Okay, so he's on his way. Ahmad Sadeghi, the Iranian embassy ambassador. So the embassy will close, presumably.
Yeah. Anyway, social media, I had a look at that the next day, and they're all sure this is not true. It's a get-up. It's a false flag operation. It's the people who are wedded to the Palestinian side are firmly in the pro-Iranian camp.
Well, the Adas Israel synagogue attack, the arson attack there, that was in December of last year, and it was peculiar that we had footage of 2 offenders who started the fire, and it seemed very odd that no charges were laid, Jack, you know.
Yeah, I had Jewish friends asking me about this. Why is that? And there's no publicity about it. And I said, well, look, one of the possibilities I thought was that there's more investigation going on that they can't talk about. You know, I mean,
what I do remember, because I was particularly keen on to find out more and more about this. There were reports indicating that there was a group contriving and planning this, who were using encrypted apps to contact the local criminals in Melbourne to commit these offences, including the arson attack. That's the last bit I read, and so I had presumed that these were criminal figures, possibly even international figures. But of course, it was the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Jack.
So it would seem, yes.
And they are now a proscribed terrorist organisation in Australia.
Yes. I was asked the other day, well, what if ASIO have got it wrong? I mean, they're not immune to getting things wrong. There's no real answer to that. I mean, there's nowhere you can go to test whether they've got it right or wrong.
Well, I guess the Iranians will plead their innocence, and those on social media will say that it's a fit-up. But what I understand about ASIO and its boss, I doubt it very much. I think they would have had a fair amount of solid evidence to prove a connection between the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and these criminals at street level.
And it fits with what we know about the IGRC as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these guys are inspiring sort of terrorist events around the world. So
Argentina, wherever you go.
Well, what we know now, Jack, is that that a lot of the New South Wales attacks on premises, on graffiti on walls, cars set alight, etc., particularly in the eastern suburbs, that these were committed at the instruction of criminals.
Mm.
And now we see the Adas fire, and I believe also the arson attack at the Sydney bakery, I think, isn't it? Jewish bakery. That they too were contrived by, well, as we discussed, the Iranian state. So perhaps what I'm saying is that we had this great outflowing of anti-Semitism in the community that's not been realised, that these were all contrived attacks. And people may have strong views about Israel and Gaza, but they are not veering into the anti-Semitic space in terms of actions anyway.
Yeah, time will tell.
All right. The NDIS, we've talked about this a lot. It is in need of reform. The spending is moving into the out-of-control area. It's a $40 billion a year scheme. And Mark Butler, the health minister, he's the NDIS minister, of course, yes, has stepped in and said that too many autistic children were on the scheme. And he believes, and it's difficult for me to disagree with this, but that they have a level of neurological divergence, but that is not of itself a disabling or lifelong disability.
No. And the idea is to remove from the NDIS scheme that proportion of young people who are diagnosed with autism at a lower level, at a low to moderate level.
So Butler is saying he's looking at a target of 8% reduction in spending in the NDIS. So some of this is driven clearly by accountancy. Is it in the best interests of children or neurodivergent children? I would say, having known quite a few, I won't mention names. It would be untoward, but I know of one a neurodivergent kid, very, very bright kid, basically now at university, studying pure and applied maths and all this sort of stuff. Well, he received no NDIS support throughout his life. He's now in his early 20s, but he did go to a regional school, a regional primary school that had a neurodivergent support group in it, within a very small regional school. And he grew up through there, he went to the local high school, and now he's doing things that you and I will not understand, Jack, like pure and applied maths.
Yeah. Well, that's the sort of thing Mark Butler seems to be pushing for. Yeah.
Well, the simple fact of the matter is the NDIS cannot continue in its current form. Otherwise, it will basically overwhelm the budget.
It will swallow the budget.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Okay. Train station and flats for Wallara. I saw a woman on Instagram, a local Liberal member, I think. She'd be the member for I'm going to say Vaucluse, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, Kelly
and
Sloan.
Yeah, that's her name. Yeah. She's got a beautiful name for a MP from Vaucluse, Liberal MP for Vaucluse. And she was saying, 10,000 new homes in the eastern suburbs, and many of them will be high-rise, high-density housing around a Wallara station. We could say a new Wallara station, Jack, but there always was one. I didn't know this, to be honest, and I've been on that line a few times going from, the city to Bondi Junction.
Many times, I would have thought.
I've never seen a Wallara station.
Well, the bones of the platform and stuff were built when the Eastern Suburbs Railway was put in.
Yeah,
but the station was never built around them.
It is, I have to say, very close to Bondi Junction.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an easy walk.
Yes, but one thing we've learned in Hong Kong is if you want these train stations to work, you build a lot of them, not very far apart, so people pour into the train station and use it. The actual usage rate of the Eastern Suburbs Railway is pretty low.
Well, the great mistake of all of this, Jack, going back many years, and now it can't be fixed, is that train line should have gone out to Bondi, not just to the junction. But now the property compensation just means it can't be done. It's just overwhelming spending just to I guess they could build a tunnel underneath Bondi Road, and who knows. But
anyway, the plan for this is to build the station at Wallara and then to change the zoning laws around the station so that up to 10,000 apartments can be built. And of course, the people in the area, like a lot of people in various areas around Sydney,
but especially funny when it comes from the eastern suburbs of Melbourne.
Don't want this because they like
they're NIMBYs.
Yeah, they like their streetscape and their neighbourhoods as they are, and I understand that. That's perfectly okay. Yeah. And of course, one of the objections they're making is, well, look, if you build apartments out in Wallara, they're not going to be affordable for people. If the idea is to make more affordable homes, this won't have any effect because there'll be 2 million starting.
10,000 new homes, hell of a lot of supply.
Yeah. To that, I would say, well, the Auckland experiment says that's not quite right, because in Auckland they freed up the zoning regulations and had an explosion in house and apartment building right across Auckland. And the biggest effect that had on prices was the cost of rent at the lower levels, because it works as a cascade. If you build an apartment to rent that's, a $2 million apartment, people move in there and they move out of somewhere and someone moves into there, and at the end, at the bottom, at the most critical end, there are empty apartments, empty places to live. So it does have an effect. But this is going to play out not just in Sydney but across all the capital cities, as to people who've got genuine, reasonable interests, but they're different genuine, reasonable interests, and they're going to come in conflict.
Well, there was a sort of form of NIMBYism in the inner west, and I'm trying to think of the suburb, but one of the locals there wanted the entire suburb to be National Trust listed, Jack. So it essentially couldn't be touched. And that's just madness. You just can't have that.
Yes.
And he was a Labor bloke, and, he had his nice house on his quarter-acre block, and that's the way he wanted it. I can understand the mentality, but it's just not in. It's just not going to work with a city the size of Sydney.
That sounds like Haberfield. They were talking about
Haberfield. It was, yeah. Thank you.
And if you go back to Kelly's Bush and Hunters Hill, the green bands, that was really popular. But I think that the general population view switched a bit from that now, that you can't be against all development, that we actually need to have some thickening and some higher density areas. So, and they've both got genuine interests in this, And I suspect the winner is going to be the side that is more clever about picking the right fights. The residents of Castle Crag, Castle Crag on the North Shore?
Yes.
They're having a big demonstration about a proposal to put up a 10-storey block of flats. And Castle Crag's a lovely sort of peninsula just out into the Northern Harbour. And a lot of it was developed by Marion and Walter Burley Griffin. Right? So the people are demonstrating and saying, well, you're ruining a historic streetscape and all that kind of stuff. And I actually know the area because I drove past it a lot. And I had a look on Google Maps, and where the 10-storey development goes, it's just a shopping centre, Yeah. I mean, it's so.
Well, there's a lot of NIMBYism.
To argue against that is really bad.
I mean, how many Californian-style bungalows do we need to, basically, set in stone,
if it's Haberfield, you say, okay, these 4 streets or whatever, they might get a National Trust thing, but there's plenty of rubbish parts of Haberfield as well that might be improved. Doesn't happen here in Hong Kong. We don't preserve anything much. We just knock it over and build up a 50-storey tower,
Well, I think that's increasingly that has to be the mentality. If we're going to deal with the supply side of housing, we're talking about, people want to talk about housing as a human right. I'm not sure that it is, but it is certainly in our system it's not. You have to be able to either afford to rent or afford to buy. That's the way it works. But we need to deal with the supply elements. Otherwise, people are paying too much in rent or indeed paying too much in their homes. The other element that I would think about while we're going through this rapid development, rapid working of the supply side of housing in Australia is the quality of housing. And I suspect some of it might be a little bit shabby, Jack, and that's something we need to be careful of.
This is tricky to fix, though. At the same time as I think that's right, Claire O'Neill has said that, look, it's too hard to get approval to build houses because the building code now is 3,000 pages long. It's starting to look like the Tax Act, and every time they put another clause in there, it kind of adds to the cost of building. So you've got to ask yourself what's the best way of ensuring quality of housing without adding too much to the cost of building? Right?
Yes, and look, I know just in this local area, in the Southern Highlands, the amount of permits that builders need to apply for and receive, just staggering. So there's a long process with longer than most council areas in the state in terms of an approval of a DA. And then when that gets your soil to be turned, then you've got all sorts of certificates and permits to receive, to obtain, before finally you get the occupancy certificate. And these things are all expensive. So if you need to get an environmental report, and you will,
you've got to pay
that's
someone.
going to cost you thousands. Then you're going to need various other permits and requirements that are going to cost thousands as well. So it's not just that it's taking long; it's actually adding to the cost of building.
Yeah, one of the things that the Auckland changes, the Auckland experiment did, was to cut out a lot of that, just to make it easier for people to actually knock over an undistinguished property and build.
I know that one of the success stories in housing, coming from a very low base, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, did the same thing.
Yes.
All right, productivity. Gary Banks, he was the chairman of the Productivity Commission from its inception until in 1998 until 2013. He's headed national inquiries on a variety of significant public policy and regulatory topics. Gary Banks, on the Productivity Roundtable, which wrapped up last week. On the one hand, we have been busy eliminating our competitive advantage in energy, while on the other hand, we are reviving our traditional disadvantage with respect to labour. And I presume he's saying the cost of labour.
He is. I think that's an interesting point of view, and I'm glad it's being put out there. It's not going to win anything at the moment, but it's a point of view we need to listen to.
All right, we have to keep moving. We'll get back to Oasis, Jack, because, there he is there. Israel and Gaza, we want to have a look at it there. Alan Howe writes, with luminous clarity, the good and the evil in the Middle East exposes itself. One side cherishes reason, liberty and improved lives of learning, space, peace and well-being. The other argues for and from darkness. I won't go on, but these are rather... yes, we know that Israel is the only it was the only democracy in the Middle East. We know that, and that is one reason that we continue to support Israel. At the same time, Israel is wrapped up in political dysfunction at the moment, and that is driving some very, very bad decisions.
Yeah, I'm glad the Australian printed this. It's a very bleak assessment of Gaza and Hamas, but it is common enough in Israel, and also common enough amongst Israel's Arab neighbours, but most uncommon in the West.
Look, I think the issue here is that Netanyahu has aligned himself or is in coalition with some extremist groups now, with some extremist political parties, what we might call ultra-Zionists, Jack, who believe there's essentially no role for Arabs in Israel or Gaza. And those are the people that are keeping Netanyahu in power. So that equation has to be contemplated too. And it may well be that Netanyahu, with the exception of the American administration, I guess the Biden administration was not always so supportive, but with the exception of the Trump administration, a lot of Europe and, of course, Australia is starting to look at things a little differently. Ukraine, Jack, peace talks there have gone nowhere. And the war continues. There are now, according to the Ukrainian government, now 6,000 to 7,000 Cubans serving in the Russian military in Ukraine.
Yes.
And that follows, of course, a significant force of North Koreans.
And there's a good reason for that. I don't know whether you had a look at the figures on that. Their salary goes from $160 a year in Cuba to 30,000 in the US, which is a fairly large incentive to make the move.
Yes, well, there's always a fairly significant disincentive, Jack, isn't
yes,
there?
you might not come back. Yes,
that's exactly right. This is a staggering figure. More than 800,000 Russian troops have been killed or wounded.
Yes, that's what the Ukrainians believe. I think it's probably right.
And so what we have here, Jack, is, the anti-war movements get driven by elderly women in black shawls, mourning their children, perhaps their husbands, their children, as their coffins are brought back to their homes, and that can be a major driver of political change.
Yes, the history of Russia, though, is, don't be fooled into thinking that high casualty figures are going to weaken their resolve, is that they've been prepared to put a lot of people through the Mensa every time.
A long history of it as well, but there is that element. You can go too far, and that's when, we are talking about a heavily oppressed population, but you can go too far with this stuff, and that's when people hit the streets. They've had enough of it. I know the Ukrainians, similarly, the morale, not so much of troops, but of the Ukrainian people, is just have been worn down by trauma and tragedy.
Yes.
The Putin-Zelensky talks don't appear to be going anywhere. It would seem that Putin doesn't want to meet him.
It's not going anywhere right at the moment.
No.
Which is not to say
a little bit harder than the first day of my presidency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit slower than that.
And we have missile attacks in the meantime and drone attacks going on. I think the Russians accused the Ukrainians of drone and missile attacks on a nuclear power plant. And on Russian oil refineries, Jack.
Certainly, there were credible reports of gas station queues, as they were described, in Russia, that the Ukrainians were back to using the HIMARS long-distance missiles into Russia. It looks a bit like, while nothing's happening with the talks, people are trying to gain some ground, some impact in the meantime.
Yeah, well, that's been going on for a long time. That's part and parcel of this sort of to-date failed peace process, that everyone's trying to get as much territory as they possibly can.
Yeah, and to cause as much damage as they can in the meantime.
And infrastructure damage. So, meanwhile, the Russians keep pounding Ukrainian cities and killing civilians, which is a disgrace. But it's entirely likely that we'll, next year or the year after that, we'll still be talking about the Russian-Ukrainian war. God, there just seems not to be any sort of exit path there, any negotiated settlement there.
No.
And no strong prospect of it, or even a weak prospect of it. In France, Jack, what's going on there?
Well, it looks like the government's going to fall on September 8th, that the Prime Minister will lose the confidence of their parliament.
And it's all about paying back a bit of debt, Jack.
It is. Yep.
And
it's not about anything dramatically important, but whether the Prime Minister's lost his patience and wants to test this, or don't know what the background story is, because no one's been transparent about it. But
he's talking about spending cuts needed to save €44 billion a year. Now, I know we're talking billions, and that's actually not a big cut. 44 billion is not a big cut for an economy or for government spending in a country as big as France.
Yes.
So it's the same old thing. The French will basically brawl about anything that's often not of any great magnitude.
The fact that he may be right isn't going to save him, I don't think.
Yes, he says, we face an immediate danger which we must tackle, otherwise we have no future. It's rather grim. He said of the country's huge debt burden, adding that the vote would focus on whether MPs agreed with the gravity of the danger and choose the path to fix it. He said there are moments when only a calculated risk can allow you to escape a more serious risk. It is a matter of the survival of our state, the image of our nation, and each and every family. But it's likely the French legislature is going to say, nah, mate.
Well, I think all of the parties have said no, they're not going to. All of the parties of significance have said no, they're not going to support it.
So he either backs down or his party collapses in the parliament.
Yeah, by the way, he's finished. Yeah.
Meanwhile, in Germany, Jack, what's going on there? Basically, the Friedrich Merz, the chancellor there, has said the German welfare state is no longer financially sustainable.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing for him to say.
Spending around 47 billion, spending going past that in terms of welfare spending in Germany, Jack.
Yeah, hard to know where that will end up, but he's a slightly unusual leader for Germany. He's not really a sort of a standard German politician. So,
more of a realist, do you think?
Yeah. He's not someone who spent his whole life doing it, which is the usual German pattern.
All right. While we're in Europe, the Oasis phenomenon rolls on, Jack. I've seen they've done a number of shows at Wembley. They've been to Ireland. They had a wonderful time there, with the exception of their brother, who's been charged with rape in Ireland, Jack. He was part of the entourage, but he's been quickly flicked. The figure that I liked here is that at Wembley, with their 90,000 strong audience, the audience consumed 250,000 pints of beer. What's that? That's three, almost 2.5 for every man, woman, and child, and that's more than twice the beer at the Coldplay concerts, and more than 6 times that of the Taylor Swift. The breweries would be very, very happy with Oasis, Jack.
Yeah, I don't know whether you've seen much of the footage from the concerts, but the crowd are the show at these concerts.
Oh, there's beer just flying around.
And everyone's singing along. The crowd are the show, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the guys get up there and start each number, and they could probably go and have a cup of tea and a blunt, really, for all that they do for the rest of it, because the crowd take over.
Well, I did see Liam addressing the crowd. I'm not sure where it was, whether it was Wembley or Manchester or even Dublin, and he said, "Hands up those who've never seen an Oasis concert before." And he was talking to the young, because there is a sort of generational audience now. You've got people from the 90s, the sort of nostalgic group that they're now people in their 50s, but you've also got a younger crew going along there. And one by one, the hands went up and all that sort of stuff. And he gave them a big rap. Yeah, but everyone knows the words, and one thing that continues to pop up on social media is the starting tune of Cigarettes and Alcohol, which is one of their sort of anthemic songs, and the beer flies everywhere and everyone's jumping up and down.
Yeah, well, they don't drink all 250,000 pints. They spray a bit of it around as well. Yeah,
and of course it's sort of contrary to their own personal habits too, Jack. Knowles looks after himself pretty well, occasionally has a drink, and Liam, known for excess in the past, he likes his teas now. He likes to drink a nice Irish breakfast tea, I think, is his tea of choice. Occasionally has a drink, but not many. And look, if you're doing a tour like that, these guys have got to stay fit and healthy for a long time. They're in Australia in 3 months' time, a little bit less.
Yeah, and they've managed not to try and knock spots off each other so far, so that's good.
Noel expressed a deep praise for his brother and said he's just been fantastic. You know, he's been focused. He hasn't been a problem, complaining that he can't sing and all this sort of stuff. He's been the one he's been the glue that's kept it together, as far as I can tell. All right, over to the United States. Donald Trump's health. Have we seen the back of his hand? What is going on there? There seems to be just some really bad makeup for a start, and it just looks like he's got a
makeup was terrible. The makeup was terrible.
Really bad makeup, and it looks like he's at least had a cannula installed on occasions. People are talking about cardiovascular issues, Jack.
Could well be. My hands bruise all the time, I can tell you, after 10 years of cardiac treatment.
Yeah. I just had a scan the other day, so I got a dirty, great big bruise on the back of my hand as well. But, they did say that he had, well, you remember the cankles issue?
Yeah.
That he had some sort of vascular issue ongoing.
I think the doctor said he had chronic venous insufficiency, which is
kind of a big bit of nothing, isn't it? Really,
it's very common in a bloke. I've got it to some extent. My legs swell up in different stages. Yeah.
But has it moved into dementia, Jack? We do hear him having these rambling speeches that go off into weird tangents. So, I mean, it's a little bit like Joe Biden all over again, isn't it? That political watchers are now looking for signs of dementia that they're probably not skilled or educated enough to make an assessment on.
Yeah, I just can't believe that serious Democrats are now looking at running at this an angle after Joe Biden.
It is really, really dumb, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
They need to find.
I mean, one thing you can say about
way.
Trump is he's shrewd. He may not be the most intelligent man, but he's shrewd. And in a way that Joe Biden really wasn't towards the end at any event.
And meanwhile, this is something that, was it Nixon was obsessed about flag burning back in the day? Wanted to make it a law, but of course, First Amendment says it's freedom of expression, Jack.
And the courts do as well.
So Trump wants to make a mandatory off for a year if you get caught burning a flag, even accidentally, even if you suddenly set fire to one in a Durry incident.
That's what he said on Truth Social. If you actually read the executive order, I can't fit it all on one screen because it's quite long. Where he goes through a whole list of exemptions and caveats and all that kind of stuff, right? And subject to this bit of the Constitution and that bit of the Constitution. But what he's done, and this is what the Democrats still persist in doing, he'll have Democrats out there burning flags just to oppose him. And, of course, the American people don't – it might be legal, but they don't like seeing it happen, right?
Look, I mean –
and once again, they're reacting –
incapable of picking their fights, and that's what they've got to really do here. At the same time, Jack, I've been looking at this. US tourism has just been belted. Now, depending on what you read or the figures that you read, the New York Post had a figure of a $4 billion loss, but elsewhere there seems to be almost an accord that it's around about a $12.5 billion loss per annum, by the way, or just this year in the current year, 2025. Hotel vacancy rates are at 62% across the country. Have you seen any footage from Vegas?
Well, Vegas has got a couple of problems going on at once.
Yeah, there is more to it than just the Trump stuff.
Yeah, one of it is that they have. It used to be a place you could go to where the booze was cheap, the food was cheap, and you had a great time. It's gotten horrendously expensive. I think we were talking about this last week. $50 just to use your minibar to put your own beer in it, right? $50 a day.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff.
So that's kind of nuts.
But the footage I've seen, you've got the
place is empty,
and there's no one there.
Yeah, that's right. Place is empty.
So, but this is so. The Canadian tourist rates are down by 52%. Tourist entries into Canada are down by 52%. So it's affecting Canada as well. I guess they're picking up a little bit on the roundabouts that international seminars and conferences once held in places like Vegas, Chicago, Atlantic City, elsewhere, are now being moved to Vancouver and Toronto. And this comes on so the tourist industry is really, really struggling. And I think Trump turned his attention to it briefly around the ice raids and said, "Oh, we've got good people working on the farms, and we've got good people working in the hotels, and so forth. So we're going to leave them alone." But that didn't happen. I think Stephen Miller interceded, and so these arrests are still being made in the hospitality industry, making it even worse.
I saw a survey from the UK about attitudes to visiting the US, and they accompanied it with some vox pops, and people were very opposed to. I don't want to go to the US, and the numbers, the change in numbers was quite significant, and some of it was a little bit odd. People were saying, "Well, I might get arrested." There's no freedom of speech over there. I thought, well, given what's going on in the UK, I'm not sure which is worse. But but public perception has turned against them in that regard.
You walk through the UK. I mean, you get through customs in 12 seconds flat, and you get through customs and passports. It's a scan exercise. You're on the Heathrow train into London about 10 minutes after you land. That's not happening in the US. So part of that problem is, and has been for a long time, by the way, prior to Trump, but getting worse now, is this intense security, long waits for domestic flights, all this sort of stuff. And these things are killers for the tourist industry. It also comes on the back of the fact that parcels are not being sent to the United States, not just from Australia Post, but from Europe, Asia, and elsewhere, Jack, because they will trigger tariffs. So something like that's got to be fixed up. You get the sense that the Trump administration is all big picture, but no sense of detail, and so you'll have these running sores. All right. Meantime, a bit of a running sore. John Bolton's house raided, the former national security advisor to Donald Trump in his first term, and a much and a deep critic of Donald Trump ever since. John Bolton's house in Maryland was raided, and by the FBI, Jack. It did look, you got to say, it did look political. It relates to some allegations, as I understand, historical allegations of a book that Bolton wrote where he sought permission to use some material that might have been classified. And there's a view within the administration that he was publishing classified material, which is a bit much from Donald when we remember how much classified material was sitting in Mar-a-Lago, Jack. Not a good sign.
People need to remember the lessons of Robespierre.
Well, come on. What are the lessons of Robespierre?
If you want to send people to the guillotine, remember, eventually the tumbrel will come for you.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, these things are sort of really dangerous. Never a fan of John Bolton's. Trump's criticism of him are actually quite right. He is a hawk. He is pro-war.
What was the comment? Never saw a war he didn't like.
Yeah, something like that. So I'm not a fan, but the man writes a book which was a study of his time in the administration in the Trump's first period in the White House. And you just get the sense that, anyone who criticises Trump, not necessarily by Trump, maybe, but by his little poison monkeys will get out and make life very, very difficult for these people. And one man who's trying to make life very difficult for Donald Trump in an amusing fashion is Gavin Newsom. And he's taken to the Trump form of communication. In fact, it's one of his communications workers who has a very deft touch at speaking in Trump fashion on Gavin Newsom's social media. His X account has increased its followers by 450% since mid-June. Google searches for Gavin Newsom have gone up like a rocket. Newsom has been doing what I've wanted a Democrat to do for a long time, radio host Charlemagne Thagood said on his syndicated Breakfast Club program. So is it breaking through? I know the Fox News guys, they thought it was, look, I know he's trying to be funny, but it's not funny. He's probably the most outspoken critic of Donald Trump in the United States at the moment.
It certainly put him to the front of the pack, at least in California and probably on a wider sense. It's kind of really going to depend on whether what he's doing on social media or his boffins are doing on social media is just is reactive to Trump, or whether he's setting some sort of agenda. This is what they've got to break away from, is just reacting to everything that Trump does, letting him set the agenda.
Well, meanwhile, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, Jack, and another Democrat potential candidate for the presidency in 2028, has said, do not come to Chicago, Donald Trump. Do not bring your soldiers here. And made mention of the soldiers themselves being placed in very, very difficult situations. There is a pattern emerging, isn't there, Jack, that Donald Trump is, what we say, looking for distractions, and as we discussed last week, forces the Democrats or obliges the Democrats to argue for, better crime statistics when the people are seeing cities like Chicago and so forth, being ravaged with crime. Now, murder rates and rates of violent offending are down. They're down in DC. They're down in Chicago. They're down in LA. But that doesn't stop the strong on crime sort of approach from Donald Trump. Do you think he'll move troops into Chicago? I think he will at some point in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, because he knows, particularly the mayor of Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, will be straight on the television more or less arguing in favour of crime, if it's anti-Donald Trump.
That's the problem. But it is a really dangerous practice. I mean, it is really, really dangerous. Got a little fun fact before we move on you're moving back to the UK, but a little fun fact for you, Jack, that I just picked up yesterday. The infant mortality rate in Alabama, in the state of Alabama, is 0.92 per 1,000. That is almost 1 in 100 babies born in Alabama do not make it to the age of 6. And that's a staggering, that's one of those things where, long news consumer, a news writer, all this sort of stuff. That was one of those statistics that really blew me away. It's getting even worse, Jack, and it's nothing to do with, very, very little to do with Trump. One of the things Alabama has used to prevent is the intervention of a special CDC group to keep their particularly neonates and births of children or deaths immediately postpartum down. But the Alabama legislature have sort of nixed all of that. They've got extreme anti-abortion laws in that state, which will only see this figure go up. Now, as we've sometimes mentioned, the United States is 48th in the world in infant mortality. And those figures are driven essentially by red states. And you have to say, well, there's historical, it's woven into the history of the place around slavery and emancipation. But there's also, legislative design around this stuff to create underclasses of people based on race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status.
Well, there's an acceptance that that's the way it's always been. And this is not necessarily black v white. There's always been a white underclass as well. And there's an acceptance that this is the way it's always been, and that we shouldn't be altering it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That with some of the abortion law stuff they brought in, it's actually making things much worse. And you would understand that. I mean, it just strikes me as very odd that they make the moral argument about killing babies in the womb and so forth, while they are by legislative instrument creating the preconditions for an increase or a spike in what is already a disgraceful infant mortality rate.
Mm.
All right, United Kingdom. It took the last benighted Tory government 14 years to slump to a net approval rating of minus 56, but Sir Keir Starmer, not to be outdone, has managed to do it in 14 months, Jack.
He has. We'll talk about this next week, but it's reached a really interesting stage, UK politics. Nigel Farage, who's the tearaway leader in all of the polling, announced his solution to the illegal immigration last week. He's talking about removing the UK from the European Convention on Human Rights, all that sort of stuff. And I suspect it's going to be wildly popular.
It may well be popular, but I don't know that it's going. We'll talk about all this next week in some detail. But I'm not suspect. I suspect that it will not survive a legal challenge. So yes, we do have to look at this. The rise of Farage continues. They're a scandal-riddled party of just a handful of MPs, but if there was an election held last weekend, they would have won it.
Yeah. When you're doing your homework, just remember this, that the Parliament in the UK is sovereign in a way that no other parliament in the world is. So it's got more power than any of them. So when you're looking at what's possible and what's not. But yes, it is quite extraordinary that what's really a ragtag bunch of 4 MPs and a few hangers-on is now the dominant political force in the country.
Indeed. Well, now it has come time to do a little bit of sport, and there's plenty on, but we're about to go through a little bit of a drought while the AFL has its week off before the finals start. Jack,
bad idea. Should be the week before the grand final.
Well, last night we got a little bit of taste of footy when a game, I think it was postponed. I think
from
round
the
3 or
opening
4
round.
after Queensland's flooding, and so the Gold Coast Suns played an Essendon side that didn't look like they wanted to be there at all, and were fairly soundly beaten. It must be said in Essendon's favour that they basically almost played an under-19 side last night. I mean, there are a few names there, but. And the Gold Coast Suns, of course, are into their first final, so it would have been a hard watch for a Western Bulldogs fan last night.
There was some good social media commentary after about 20 minutes of the game. Someone asked the question, do you think the Bont has cracked the first beer yet, knowing the season is over?
Yeah, it wouldn't have taken long because I think the Bombers kicked an early goal and it took them a long time to kick another one. And the Gold Coast Suns, I'm just going to make a little bit of a prediction that they win their first final.
They've got to go to Freo, don't they, first up, I think?
Yeah, and look, they're a good side. Their best football's really good enough. Look, Fremantle were terrific against the Western Bulldogs, so they stand a good chance. But look, while we've got the week off in the AFL for reasons that we don't agree with, we've got Adelaide Crows top. We've got Geelong second. Who's third? Who's on first? Basically, who's third is the Lions, of course. Collingwood fourth.
Yeah.
So they're the ones who should be in the running. It's an interesting prospect. I looked at the bookies, and they've got Geelong installed as premiership favourites. They will have to get past Brisbane at the G, and that's not going to be easy. I think that game's a coin toss. When you look at Adelaide and Collingwood, at Adelaide, I think that's more likely that Adelaide will proceed through to the preliminary final, and that should install them as favourites as far as I'm concerned.
I wouldn't be taking big odds on any of it. I think there's plenty of chances there. Although, to be honest, I think if you look at all of the sub data, Geelong and Brisbane have been, really very good most of the year. Adelaide have gotten better as the year's gone on.
Yeah, and often is a question of momentum.
And
any side outside of that top four,
and Collingwood's data's not very good.
Well, Collingwood, I guess they have the chance to create their own momentum in a week's time. Anyone outside that top four a chance? I suspect Hawthorn are probably the best of the sneakiest chances. Best of the sneaky chances.
Yes, and Freo.
Yeah. Look, again, they're going to have to do a lot of travelling. They're going to host a final, but after that, it's going to get a little bit tougher for them. So anyway, meanwhile, Jack at Carlton might have to pull the boots on next year. Jack Silvani gone, Tom de Koning gone. Who's not quite sure where Jack will end up at the moment, but he's indicated that he will be signing with another club.
I had a Carlton mate on the text machine, lamenting that, and the long connection between the Silvani family and Carlton. And my response was, well, that long connection of the family's been gone for a while. That's sort of when Stephen had his falling out with the club. That was kind of over, really.
Look, in Jack's case, he doesn't owe the Carlton Football Club anything. He's been a great servant of the club in some quite dark days as well. A very talented footballer who's now sort of re-emerged as a tall defender.
In the best form of his career, I would have said. He's never been a top five best and fairest. He's only got one top 10, I think, in his career, but he'll almost certainly be top five this year.
Look, he's just done everything. I mean, there was a time there when he was rucking, and he's 6'2", against monsters. So, and for Tom de Koning too, good luck to you. Someone runs up, somewhere between $1.7 and $1.8 million a year for 8 years. Well, you're going to take that, aren't you? You'd be foolish not to. I honestly think Tom de Koning will be the standout ruckman in the competition as Max Gawn sort of moves into retirement over the next few years, and Tom de Koning will be a significant asset. I'm wondering what Rowan Marshall, the ruckman at St Kilda, is doing, because I thought that would be a nice little replacement. So Carlton have certainly got their work cut out for them. They'll need to find a ruckman, they'll need to find a tall defender, they need to find some pace, and they need to find some skill with the ball. Sydney, Jack, your mob finished 11th? No, 10th. And
the best of the also-rans.
Yeah, and in pretty good nick too. And really, I think this would affect any side when your elite players are missing for most of the season. And Errol Goulden is the example. I think he's only played 7 or 8 games this year. When your elite players are missing, you're going to struggle to win. And when they start getting Errol back, I think Isaac Heaney's had a terrific season. He'd be a smoky for the Brownlow, wouldn't he?
I think I nominated him last week as his.
Yeah, I think you might have too. And I think he's a midfielder who kicks multiple goals. It's not as if the umpires won't be, and he's blonde, good looking. It's not as if the umpires are going to ignore him. And he's polled pretty well in the past too. He had a reasonably good year, although he dropped off towards the end. But I think the Swans can look at that season and learn a lot from it.
There's a few holes to fix.
Well, I just think if they've got their best side on the park more often than not, they'll definitely make the 8 next year.
We could use a really good marking forward, perhaps Charlie Curnow or Harry Mackay.
Yeah, well, they're talking about Charlie, but Charlie, oh God, Jesus, Melbourne footy journalism. They were harassing him while he got into his car yesterday. And he said, look, I've already spoken about this. The idea that he will go somewhere else, I can tell you, is just nonsense. The club don't want him to go. He doesn't want to go, by his own words. But, you have these media types who just want to sort of make a story for themselves and basically, oh, no, I believe he'll be going to Sydney. And Carolyn Wilson was a perfect example.
While we're talking about the trouble is in Melbourne, there is so much football media that everybody's, they're all chasing too few stories. So they've got to kind of invent stories. I watched a little bit of it the other night, and they were all getting upset about Isaac Rankin having gone to Rome and not done a press conference or talked to his teammates. And I'm kind of thinking, look, the guy got 4 weeks, 2 of which are going to be finals, right?
The club I don't know whether the club, what we would say, but the club not just aware, but encouraged him to go to Europe.
Yeah, but he's got his 4 weeks. That's the punishment. There's no requirement that he has to go out there and publicly humiliate himself, have a struggle session.
Yeah.
That's just not part of it.
All of that reporting around the Rankin incident and what he said there was just terrible. It was all about, well, how many weeks is he going to get, and is it going to be 3 or 4 or 5? But no one actually got into the issue of why he would be getting weeks in the first place. So no one's actually arguing the moral issue. I noticed that a former West Coast Eagles player came forward yesterday declaring himself a bisexual. I'm just trying to think of his name, and I should get it out.
Is Mitch Brown sound right?
Mitch Brown, that's right, yeah. And look, good on him. And that is, I guess, the first of its kind in AFL VFL history. The NRL are a good step above this, but yeah, I just thought the journalism was terrible. It was all about the weeks and the process, and the AFL's gone on too long, and all this sort of stuff. Well, no one was actually saying this is why he's going to get weeks, and so we're talking about language that is now verboten. On a sporting field, and why that is. Anyway, just terrible Melbourne bloody journalism again. Ken Hinkley and Simon Goodwin. Well, Simon is into early retirement. Do you think he'll pop up with an AFL club? The former Melbourne coach?
He got paid for next year, so I don't think he's got a rush, but I suspect he'll be someone will find a role for him in the short term, and eventually he'll probably coach again.
Former assistant coach at Essendon, of course, before he moved to Melbourne.
Kenny Hinkley, I don't think will coach again, but I would be surprised if he's not. That he would be being made offers as we speak.
Well, three of Carlton's coaching team were let go yesterday.
Yeah,
and there is a view that Ken Hinkley might come into the Carlton Footy Club as a sort of mentor coach. I noticed Melbourne got rid of the former Port Adelaide captain, Chock Williams, and that was a bit sad.
Yeah, he's
rather abrupt.
He's been. I'm sure he'll find somewhere else good to go as well, Choco.
Yeah, well, certainly Carlton will be looking for at least 3 coaches and a general manager of footy. So there are some big things going on there in the NRL, Jack.
That's what Graham Wright was brought in to do, really.
Yeah, and look, I don't think they obviously need to replace TDK. The Silvani replacement is easier, quite frankly. They've had a few guys emerge. I think Mitch McGovern might be finding that he might be asked to go somewhere else just because his body doesn't stand up all that well. But anyway, moving on to the NRL now, Jack. The Raiders will finish on top. There are still a couple of games to go there. There are some big games to determine.
Did you see the Golden Point win?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. So we've got the Roosters and the Dolphins 8 and 9. That's really the only change to the final setup that could take place. The Dolphins, they're a chance to have a couple of wins, and the Roosters, I think the Roosters play the Storm at Melbourne, and then they've got a bit of a difficult game in the last round too. So it may well be that the Dolphins sneak out over the top of them. For Roosters fans, I hope they can stay staunch. Dolphins just a game below, and but have a superior points difference. And the Raiders, of course, as you say, Jack, well, they got very, very lucky against the Panthers, didn't they?
They did. Well, the Panthers set it up beautifully, and Nathan Cleary had the field goal attempt, unfortunately hit the upright, and the Raiders were able to carry the ball
straight into a bloke's arms, and he just took off and scored. So that's
and the field opened up for him, and really Nathan Cleary looked like, hang on, that's not in the script. I'm supposed to kick the winning field goal here,
and it just so close. We are talking about a game of inches, Jack. So the Raiders were triumphant against the Panthers, who now moved to 7th. They'll probably finish 6th. Depends. The Sharks are going okay. Broncos at 5th. The Storm beat the Bulldogs on the weekend. They look good and strong too, and should play the Bulldogs. I don't think there's any way that can really change. They should play the Bulldogs. I actually did the ladder predictor on the NRL, and it would seem Storm will play the Bulldogs in the first final. It's likely the Raiders will play the Warriors, who are going along pretty nicely themselves. So it's kind of anyone's competition, with the Panthers lurking in the bottom half of as a potential run through and make a grand final. But as it stands, I'd say there is a very strong likelihood of a Melbourne Storm grand final appearance again.
Yep.
All right, over to the Wallabies, Jack. They were a bit stiff. Well, not a bit stiff. I thought they were brave in defeat, and perhaps we shouldn't be saying these things now. They've developed so nicely, the Wallabies, that we shouldn't be talking about moral victories and things like that.
Yeah, I'm not a great fan of moral victories, especially when the England cricket team's involved. But look, they had a chance to put themselves in front with not long to go, missed the kick, and the Box were good in a pretty muddy pitch. It suits them. They're heavyweights, all that kind of stuff. The interesting thing is that the Australian Rugby has asked to get Will Skelton released from his French club to play against New Zealand.
Well, yes, I've seen that, and of course the fullback Tom Ryder's done an ACL. Yeah. He's a gun, so that's him gone for a year, and so they do have some overwhelming injuries. I think they're playing the Argentinians shortly, but overall, Jack, it's been a great revival, hasn't it?
It has, and a revival of interest, and partly that's not just because they've won a couple of Test matches, but it's the style of rugby
the way they play. They really play an exciting brand of footy.
It looks like, a Rod McQueen style of rugby, which, remember back to those days, it was the hottest ticket in town, Australian rugby.
Joe Schmidt's done a wonderful job.
Yeah.
Former All Black, of course, mate, isn't he? Yes. So they've chosen really well.
Former Ireland coach as well. He was a great success at Ireland.
Yeah. So they are playing an exciting brand of football, and they're getting their wins. I mean, they are playing the world champions at their home. So perhaps we shouldn't have expected too much. The first one in Joburg, I thought they were going to be beaten by 100 points in the first 10 minutes, and gee, they were good. Came away with the chocolates.
Let's hope this time Australian rugby does something with the money apart from hose it up against the wall.
Oh, I think we need to have rugby strong in this country.
Yeah, we can't have it.
We can't have it as a second string code.
Just in front of lacrosse.
Yeah, that's what I always say to my rugby mates. Oh, they're still playing rugby, aren't they? Yeah, good on them. No, look, it's great to see, and we really do want a strong Wallabies World Cup 2027. We are hosts, I think, joint hosts with the Kiwis, aren't we?
We are. Yeah.
All righty. Well, that takes us out, Jack, unless you got something to offer us that might make me smile.
No, nothing particularly ridiculous happened this week.
Oh, you're not going to make me smile. Well, that's terribly bad. All right, mate. Well, that is that for episode 125 of the Two Jacks. We look forward to hearing from you. I got a little bit of mail from people around the country. We'd like to include that. So drop us a line and let us know things that you'd like us to talk about, or comments on stuff we have already talked about. And obviously, one of those things we will be talking about is the political environment in the United Kingdom that is looking very, 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 very fluid for the reigning government, who got a stonking majority and don't seem to know what to be able to do with it. But that does take us out, and we look forward to coming with you next week. See you, Jack. See you, listeners.